Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeannie Merrill. I'm the Executive Director of the Berkeley Food Institute. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Berkeley Food Institute is an interdisciplinary research, education, and policy institute based on the UC Berkeley campus. We work in partnership with communities and leverage UC resources to shape a just food and farm system. Today's webinar is our fourth webinar of our spring series. Uh, we do these webinars to connect people to policy issues and research to explore key issues in food and agriculture. To give you a quick preview, our next webinar will be in June, and that will focus on research related to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the latest here in California. And the best way to stay updated on our events is to go to our website under our events tab or sign up for our newsletter where we announce our latest webinars. For today's webinar, we'll be discussing an update on the Farm Bill and what's at stake for California agriculture and food systems more generally. In the aftermath of major cuts to SNAP in HR 1 that upended decades-long Farm Bill coalition work, the U.S. House has proposed and passed its version of the next Farm Bill. Today, we'll explore where the Farm Bill stands, how the current process differs from past reauthorizations, and what recent federal developments mean for the road ahead. We will also discuss what's at stake for California agriculture, include how Farm Bill programs and resources reach the state, and how California food and farm advocates are engaged in shaping federal policy. This discussion will offer both a national context as well as a California context. And I'm pleased today to be joined by Mike Lavender, who serves as the Policy Director of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. And Mike leads NSAC's overall policy strategy and advocacy. Just as brief housekeeping and plans, so we'll have Mike give his presentation. I have a few slides that I'll share after that, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A, and you can add your questions in the chat. But Mike, thanks for joining us. We'll have you take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Really excited to be here. Thanks for the warm welcome. As she said, my name is Mike Lavender. I am the Policy Director at the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. We are based here in Washington, D.C., with Capitol Hill out my window here. NSAC is a national grassroots alliance of over 170 member organizations nationwide. I see a few familiar names here in the attendee list, and looking forward to getting to hear from some of you and questions as we move through this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's always a good sign when I can do that successfully from the jump. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. With Farm Bill 2026, national context and California impacts. First, let's see here. Well, here we go. Okay, so just a little bit about NSAC as we get started here. Again, NSAC is a national grassroots alliance of member organizations nationwide. NSAC members, broadly speaking, are organizations who work with, serve, and support small and mid-sized farmers and ranchers in a whole variety of different manners, all the way from helping to deliver technical assistance for conservation programs and farm safety net, to delivering nutrition, food access programs and farmers market settings, and working on agricultural research and kind of the whole gamut. The NSAC model is really NSAC members and member groups work with farmers and stakeholders in their membership. And then NSAC works with our member groups to deliver experiences from on the ground with federal programs, to Congress and to federal agencies. And so, in partnership with our members and their farmers and stakeholders, NSAC brings those priorities to Washington, D.C. through federal farm bills, but also through standard administrative and government agency work. So just a very brief table of contents here for our afternoon. We'll start with a Farm Bill overview, just a quick reminder of what the Farm Bill is, what it includes, what it doesn't. Then we'll transition to Congress and kind of the current state of the Farm Bill, what's included in the House proposal and prospects for a Senate proposal. And then we'll just spend a couple of minutes towards the tail end encapsulating things that are moving at the Department of Agriculture, particularly over the past year or so. So at a high level, the Farm Bill is something that Congress renews every 5 years, roughly. It is a massive piece of legislation, think about 1,000 pages long, that sets the rules of the road for the American food and farm system. So if you're a farmer or if you are an eater and you've been to a grocery store, the Farm Bill, in one way or another, impacts the options that you have, all the way from accessing credit and loans if you're a farmer to the food you see on the grocery store shelves if you're an eater. All of us are obviously, or all of us are at least one of those. The Farm Bill contains policies, programs, and funding, again, from farm loans to food assistance for low-income families. A huge component of the Farm Bill is nutrition assistance through what's known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. The shorthand for how people refer to the Farm Bill, just as a quick refresher, I'm sure some folks in the audience know this, the Farm Bill has different titles, 12 titles in total. Actually, the first Farm Bill was really focused on just a couple of titles, Title I and Title II, and that was back in the 1930s and 1940s, and it has expanded since then. So you can see that over this 1,000 pages of text, the Farm Bill covers everything from commodity agricultural production to agricultural conservation investments, trade, nutrition, all the way down through crop insurance. And then Titles 10, horticulture, and Title 12, miscellaneous. This is where a lot of the, I almost want to say newer, but local and regional food system investments, urban agriculture, those sorts of things, beginning farmers and ranchers, a lot of those quote unquote newer concepts within food and agriculture policy, federal food and agriculture policy, appear in those titles. So the Farm Bill is expansive, and it can be a really effective tool at creating change on the ground and supporting farmers, ranchers, and folks throughout the food system and their livelihoods. But there are some things the Farm Bill doesn't do. And this is just a quick graphic to make sure folks can quickly, understand that the Farm Bill is big. It's 1,000 pages long, but it's not everything. And there are some really important things that are left out of the Farm Bill. So, for example, you can see here on the left, commodity programs, the federal crop insurance program, conservation programs, and so on and so forth, are all programs that are in the Farm Bill, that are considered in a Farm Bill, that can be improved or altered in a variety of ways. But there's a lot that's out of the farm and food worker rights and protections are nowhere to be found in the Farm Bill. Irrigation water rights, FSA food safety, the renewable fuel standard, school meals. I don't know why there's a question mark on farm to school, probably because it's dealt with in a couple of different legislative vehicles, including the Farm Bill. But that gives you a sense of there's a lot of things in the Farm Bill. There are still some things that impact people who work in the food and farm system, including food and farm workers that aren't served by current federal policy. That is a structural inequity that is baked into federal policy that that needs to ultimately be changed. But hopefully, this gives you a quick gut check sense of things that are in and that are out. And the last thing, and just in terms of a refresher here before we dive into the bulk of the presentation here, is there are a lot of different things happening at the federal level and when it comes to federal policy. There are elections. There is annual appropriations, which probably most folks hear about that in the sense of is there a government shutdown or not? Is the government funded? Annual appropriations fuels investments, fuels programs with dollars, ensuring funding goes where it's needed. Implementation is kind of the work of the U.S. Department of Agriculture to implement the programs that Congress tells it to. And the evaluation stage is really when folks like us at NSAC, many of you, and so many others are saying, hey, we passed this policy in a farm bill. Is it working? Right? Is it working out of the landscape? If not, how can we improve it? But that authorization stage, that blue box there, is the Farm Bill. It's how a bill becomes a law. It is working with the committees and members of Congress to draft new legislation that will ultimately become or be a part of the Farm Bill. So again, a really quick overview, but just wanted to make sure folks felt situated in what a Farm Bill is, and happy to answer questions if there's more detail that would be helpful. So let's get into kind of where things stand right now. And Jeannie teed it up just a few minutes ago that Congress is considering a farm bill right now. But it's important to go back a little bit to last year. The last farm bill was passed and signed into law in 2018. And if you go on the every 5 years schedule, the next farm bill should have been reauthorized in 2023. That did not happen. So when lawmakers arrived in 2025, so just about a year ago now, actually, this was the first year of the current president's second term. This was the first year of the new Congress in which Republicans held a trifecta, right? They currently control the White House and both branches of Congress. That's called a trifecta. Oftentimes in that scenario, budget reconciliation, which is a complicated name and even a more complicated process, but it allows a political party to pass legislation with fewer votes, but it puts requirements on what they can include in that legislation. So given the makeup of Congress last year, Republicans decided to pursue a budget reconciliation bill, otherwise known as H.R. 1. You may have also heard it referred to as the One Big Beautiful Bill or the One Big Ugly Bill. For our purposes today, I refer to that as H.R. 1. And there's one really important thing to remember about H.R. 1. If there's anything you could remember, there's one really important thing. It included some components of what are traditionally in a farm bill, but not all of them. And in order to pay for those things that it did include, it cut some things within the farm bill in order to pay for other things. So just to say that again, H.R. 1 updated some pieces of the farm bill, but not all pieces. And it cut funding for some programs within the farm bill to pay for other programs within the farm bill. What you can see here in the chart here is just a quick way to wrap your head around some of the things that H.R. 1 did in the farm bill space. It cut upwards nearly $190 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, in part in order to fuel farm subsidy increases. Now, why is this important, right? There's a reason that I'm bringing this up. The reason is that farm bills have historically been a coalition here in Congress of urban lawmakers who traditionally, not categorically, but traditionally look at a farm bill and think about nutrition assistance, and rural lawmakers who are primarily thinking about farm programs. And so what you had in H.R. 1 was a severe rupture of that coalition, where farm subsidy increases were fueled by cuts to nutrition assistance, effectively breaking or at least severely rupturing the Farm Bill coalition. You also have an HR1. I said there were some things that were included in the bill that are traditionally within a farm bill and some things that weren't. So the things that were included in HR1 are things like commodity program, investments in commodity programs and farm subsidies, federal crop insurance program. But, and I know it's a cardinal sin to only have slides be words, but this gives you a quick sense of, and this is the short list, frankly, of the programs that are normally in the Farm Bill that were left out by HR1, right? So for the first time ever, HR1 last year created this dynamic where we're not just passing one big farm bill and trying to get it moved through Congress. It's breaking it apart and it's saying this is more urgent than this and this is more important than this, and it's creating that dynamic. And these are the programs all the way from conservation programs to organic programs to food safety and local and regional food systems, rural development. Those are all excluded from HR1, which is hugely problematic because it's raising doubt about when or if Congress can update these programs. And that is the moment that we currently find ourselves in. So the programs, this is the short list of the programs that were left out of HR1. That is what Congress is considering right now in this current farm bill, and we'll get to that on the next slide. So this is just an infographic that the NSAC team pulled together about a year and a half ago, and I always like to lift it back up because we got it right. We got the paths right in terms of what was going to happen if reconciliation were to pass. So you can see here down on the bottom of the screen, with the passage of reconciliation, our expectation at the time was if reconciliation passes, it's going to make a farm bill in 2025 very unlikely, which turned out to be true. But we thought that in September of 2026, if you can see kind of up there in the top right-hand corner, we thought that a farm bill in 2026, even with the passage of budget reconciliation, the dynamics I just described to you, we thought it would be possible, but it would require stakeholder pressure to get it done, and it would require bipartisan action well in advance of the upcoming federal congressional midterms here in November of this year. So, and it would require both political parties to compromise. Those are exactly the dynamics that we're seeing play out right now across Congress. So here we are today. I've lost my date. What is it? May 19th. Getting closer to halfway through the year. And just a few weeks ago, the House of Representatives passed the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026, their version, the House version of the Farm Bill, an updated Farm Bill for 2026. Overall, NSAC's analysis of this bill, which we have many lengthy blogs that I can post in the chat here in just a minute of deep analysis. But our top line analysis was that the bill combined some positive policy improvements alongside funding cuts, numerous missed opportunities, and critically, a lack of new funding, right? Any new farm bill is often about the funding or the dollars that are or are not included in the bill. And the high level takeaway from the House bill for NSAC is that it doesn't include new investments that could fuel some of the policies that are included in the bill. And ultimately, the lack of new investments, the lack of new dollars in the House version of the bill is one of its greatest downfalls in our estimation. So on March earlier this year, the House Agriculture Committee approved this version of the bill. And on April 30th, several weeks later, the full House of Representatives approved the bill. You can see in the screenshot, it's almost big enough, but you can see it was a 224 to 200 vote. Three Republicans joined almost 200 Democrats in opposing the bill, whereas most Republicans, 209, joined 14 Democrats and an independent in supporting the bill, bringing it to 224 to 200. Fairly party line fairly driven by party line dynamics. So um, we talked about the high level of NSAC's analysis of the bill. Let's dig in a little bit more in the weeds of some of the steps forward that are included in the bill and some of the missed opportunities from our perspective. So, starting with the steps forward, um, in the House bill, there are new and tweaked, two separate things, new policies and tweaked policies that we believe could benefit local and regional food systems, from improvements to urban agriculture, things like permanently authorizing FSA urban county committees, directing USDA to increase outreach and technical assistance, and a number of other pieces within urban agriculture, all the way to creating the framework for a new local food purchase assistance style program, an LFPA style program, included in the bill. The bill also proposes to streamline access to farm ownership loans for beginning farmers, creates advanced pre-approval for farm ownership loans, does things like raise the minimum payment rate for the conservation stewardship program, which is uh, perhaps the most popular and effective conservation program. It also does things like adds carbon sequestration and GHG reduction as a goal to another conservation program. So there are these are some select instances. There are things to like in the House Farm Bill. Um, when I talked a minute ago about the breadth of a farm bill, and I mentioned NSAC's over 170 member organizations. Our job at NSAC is really looking from within our whole membership and across the whole bill to say, where does this whole thing fall? We're not looking at one policy or one program or one funding level. We're saying, does this move the needle for NSAC's membership and more broadly for towards a more sustainable, just food and farm system? And so we see these steps forward in there. We also see at the same time significant missed opportunities and active harm in a number of cases. So would be roughly $2 billion siphoned away from popular oversubscribed agricultural conservation programs. We know conservation, both in California and nationwide, is incredibly popular among farmers of all different types, whether small or large, diversified, specialty crop, commodity. Conservation is popular. About 50% of farmers who apply to these programs get turned away in a given year. And this bill would reduce the funding available to those two programs. The bill ignores needed farm safety net reforms that would remove red tape, particularly for small specialty crop and direct marketing farmers. I mentioned this point on the previous slide, but one of the greatest failings of the bill, in our estimation, is that it fails to provide guaranteed funding. What's known here in DC and wonk talk as mandatory funding, but it fails to provide guaranteed funding for numerous programs, all the way from urban agriculture to local and regional food system investments. So even though on the left-hand side, it's setting up positive steps in policy for things like urban agriculture and local foods, it's not coupling those with guaranteed investments that could really make a change on the ground, drawing questions about its effectiveness. It leaves out things like support for that we know is popular amongst dairies, particularly in California, alternative manure management technologies. It also fails to address something that we'll talk about in a couple slides here, major USDA staffing shortages. USDA has lost tens of thousands of staff in the past year, creating significant wait times for farmers, closed offices, closed NRCS, FSA, county offices that is limiting farmer access to USDA services. This bill fails to address that, fails to redirect USDA in a better direction to better serve farmers and ranchers. So at a high level, those are some of the bigger things we're seeing and positive steps forward in the House bill, as well as missed opportunities. We could talk all day, and I'm eager to get into more details in the Q&A for other parts of the bill you're interested in. So in the Senate, Um, with House passage now through committee and through the House floor, the next step is the Senate, right? And so there's a couple things to ground ourselves in. One is the Senate is different in that in the Senate, 50 votes or 60 votes, excuse me, 60 votes are required for a bill to pass in the Senate. In the House, it's a simple majority, right? It's about 50%. In the Senate, they have to reach 60. In the current Senate, by definition, that means that a Senate farm bill has to be bipartisan, right? 53 Republicans. If all Republicans in the Senate stick together, they have to get at least 7 Democrats and or independents in total. So that means a Senate farm bill has to be bipartisan. I mentioned this a little bit earlier as a result of HR1 and the cuts to SNAP. Um, SNAP cuts that were included in HR1 continue to be a major sticking point between Republicans and Democrats. And what I mean by that is the desire or lack thereof to address those cuts. Democrats are interested in addressing or delaying those cuts. Republicans are not at this point. That disagreement, excuse me, is a significant barrier to bipartisanship, and it is thus a significant barrier to a Senate farm bill. So one key question as attention turns to the Senate is, can the two parties resolve their differences on SNAP in a way that would free up movement on an overall farm bill? I don't have the answer to that question today, but it is one of the key things that we're watching over the weeks and months ahead. And weeks and months ahead, timing for when the Senate may consider the farm bill is uncertain. It could come as early as June. It could come not at all. It is not clear at this point. But here at NSAC, we are preparing as if there will be a Senate farm bill that the Senate considers both in the Agriculture Committee in the Senate and the Senate floor sometime in June. And what that means for us is we've worked over the years with Republicans and Democrats alike in the Senate to introduce legislation that advances the priorities of our members. And what's necessary in the moment right now is to work with all of those senators to say these are the things that have to be a part of a farm bill if it's going to be a good farm bill, if it's going to be a farm bill worth endorsing. So that is the work that's happening in the moment behind the scenes in many cases. And I'll just say, as we transition to the next slide here on USDA, it is uncertain whether a farm bill happens this year. This is a unique year, relatively unique in that it's a congressional, it's an election year, right? Election comes up in early November. That means a couple of things. One, it means that the legislative calendar is significantly shortened by about a month. Given that they're not here for all of October, Congress isn't. So there's literally less time to pass a bill. It also means that election year politics can come into consideration when members are considering their votes. So those are things that we're tracking really closely. And I would anticipate that if Congress isn't able to pass a new farm bill next year or this year, we could be right back here again next year with a new Congress, right? Potentially different majorities, and Congress considering it then. I'll transition here because I know we're probably going to have some questions. So I'll transition here just to a couple slides on USDA. As part of our work, NSAC does a ton of engagement with the Department of Agriculture. There are obviously those folks who implement a new farm bill. But there's so much other work that USDA does, as I'm sure you all know, on an annual basis. It's been a pretty unprecedented stretch at USDA since January 2025. In 2025, we saw a funding freeze to some conservation program funding and a whole slew of other programs that eventually turned into contract terminations for programs like the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, or LFPA, the Local Food for Schools Program, LFS, for the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program. Widespread terminations and cancellations of contracts, oftentimes farmer-held contracts. Most recently, this emerged as a cancellation of what's known as the Land Capital Market program, the LCM program, which was invested in kind of the next generation of beginning farmers and ranchers in supporting them. And those 49 of 50 contracts within that program were terminated by USDA just within the past month or so. So that has been an ongoing dynamic. There have been programmatic and regulatory changes influencing the terms and conditions of grants. There have also been, particularly this year, numerous USDA reorganizations ongoing at the Food Safety Inspection Service, at the Research Mission Area at USDA, at the Food and Nutrition Service, widespread reorganizations at USDA. Reorganizations can be a good thing, but oftentimes, if they're not done well, they can reduce services for farmers and ranchers. They can reduce services for stakeholders, which is the exact opposite of what we certainly are aiming for. One of the results of the organizations is that USDA is relocating quite literally where staff are working from. That often means that staff choose to leave their job rather than relocate, oftentimes their families themselves. So ongoing USDA reorganizations and staffing has been, as I mentioned a few slides ago, has been a particular challenge. This graph here on the right is NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which delivers conservation programs. This is their staffing level since going back to 2005. You can see the precipitous drop beginning around 2025. And what this means is fewer resources, fewer access points for farmers to gain access to the programs that are necessary to their success or that they really want to engage with. It's a frankly similar graph across different agencies within USDA. The final thing I'll say at USDA is that there's a lot of unprecedented things going on. And elsewhere, we're seeing some initiatives at the department from the regenerative pilot program at USDA within NRCS, which is ostensibly designed to invest resources in so quote unquote regenerative agricultural practices. We've seen plans and outlines that frankly center in the farmers first instance here on the right hand side of the screen, small farmers, programs that are important for small farmers. We've also seen plans that think through how to strengthen investments in ranchers and rebuilding capacity along supply chains. So we see these things. I think the challenge with these is it's an opportunity to engage with the administration and to say, hey, we're interested in what you're trying to do here. We would love to work. We would love to find a way to work with you and carry forward if there's shared values. Oftentimes what we find is that there's not a lot behind the curtain of these sorts of proposals. And in particular, there are also proposals from this USDA to completely gut and defund numerous programs that would support small farmers, that would deliver regenerative practices. So there's oftentimes deep contradictions that may not surprise folks, but deep contradictions in things that USDA is saying and the actions that they're taking. The challenge, though, becomes lifting up the voices of farmers and stakeholders to say, hey, there are some things that you've identified here and pushing them towards that, while at the same time reducing the harm from so many of the negative impacts and negative decisions that the administration has made over the past year plus that we know are impacting certainly folks within NSAC's membership, but more broadly. So holding those both at the same time is incredibly important. So that is, I'm 4 minutes over my time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap And I will turn it back over to you, Jeannie.
Great. Thank you, Mike. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we will have time for questions. I'm just going to briefly share some screens just to provide my screen to share some slides around the California context, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So let me that. Okay. Can you see that, Mike? Great. Thank you. There we go. Let's talk about California agriculture. I think for many of you, this will be familiar, but as a reminder, California and the impact of the Farm Bill is significant here as the largest agricultural state in the country. Many of the Farm Bill programs are certainly focused on commodities, many of which are grown outside of California in the Midwest, corn, soybeans, et cetera. But there is a strong connection still for California when it comes to the Farm Bill. We're a diverse state. We grow more than 400 different commodities, specialty crops, mainly fruits and vegetables. We're also a large dairy state, one of the leading dairy state in the country. We supply a little more than 50% of the country's fruits, nuts, and vegetables. And we have many, many farms, even though we have seen some pretty significant declines over the years of operations here in the state. And let's talk about that. These are the latest numbers from USDA starting in 2002 to last year. There was a period of time in California where we were seeing declines in mid-scale operations, but increases in small farms and increases in large farms, but hollowing out of that middle. Unfortunately, now we're also still seeing that hollowing out of mid-sized farms, but now also seeing a decline in small farms, and an increase in consolidation of large operations. So just from 2017 to 2025, seeing a 10% decrease, but you can see here pretty significant declines over the past 20 plus years. So then thinking about where the Farm Bill intersects with California food and farm systems, Mike talked a little bit about this, but crop insurance matters a lot, particularly as we see greater weather extremes, whether it's wildfires, extremes in precipitation, drought, flood, etc. Traditionally, crop insurance has not worked well for our diversified farming systems. It has been more geared towards single commodity growers, corn, soybeans, etc. We do now have whole farm revenue insurance, and California is one of the California farmers take the lead. I think we're the second largest state with farmers participating in that program, but it's still a relatively small portion of overall California farms who are participating in that kind of crop insurance, a little fewer than 2,000 farms participating. So the next Farm Bill we really need to see some crop insurance reforms, particularly in light of climate change. And that's research that Tim Bowles here on campus has done, looking at the relationship between crop insurance and climate change and the need to reform that to be more responsive to greater weather extremes. Mike mentioned conservation programs. California agriculture uses conservation programs pretty significantly. $100 million, for example, for EQIP alone in 2025, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. But there also are moves to be more innovative with conservation programs, again, to address soil health, water use efficiency. The Conservation Stewardship Program continues to be underrepresented here in California. So again, that policy change could make a difference in terms of doing a better job reaching California farmers. And then significantly, California, we have one of the largest SNAP enrollments in the country. With the profound cuts coming, we haven't even experienced all those cuts yet. to SNAP, that is going to stress and strain California families significantly. It will also stress and strain the state budget. The state budget, which was just the governor's most recent proposal, was released last week. He does propose including funding for CalFresh. But again, these are early days. There are more cuts to come, as outlined in HR 1, the budget reconciliation bill. And so what does that then mean for the state of California and our ability to address that gap in federal funding? California is the largest organic agriculture state, just in terms of acres and numbers of organic farms. And yet, in recent years, research done by our colleagues at UC Davis finds that organic farms are beginning to decline. For years and years, we just saw increases time and again for the number of organic acres and farms out there. And in recent years, unfortunately, we're seeing a downward slope for organic agriculture and a lot of economic pressures on organic farmers and farmers in general in the state. And then, the Farm Bill has also been a place for support for specialty crop research, demonstration, and outreach. And then finally, I'll just add on local and regional foods, we saw a lot of innovation in recent years around standing up new local and regional food system programs within USDA, in large part in response to some of the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic to try and have more resilient food and farm systems. But unfortunately, a lot of those dollars have been cut. And as described by Mike in the House proposal, there may be new kind of innovative ways to frame that work, but if we don't have the funding to actually get it done, that'll be tough for those who are working to build those connections, whether it's farm to school, other institutional procurement efforts, food hubs, etc. So that is a very kind of brief overview of some of the connections for California and the Farm Bill. But let's go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So let me do this. And Mike, we've got a few questions for quite a few questions for you. Let's start at the top. There was a question about Prop 12, and I don't know if you're familiar with Prop 12. I know that there's been lots of debate about trying to roll back Prop 12, which was California's animal welfare
Right.
ballot measure that passed a number of years ago. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah. My expectation, and I think what we've heard publicly from Chairman John Bozeman, who is a Republican from Arkansas and the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, is that including riders, which this would be included, the elimination, the Save Our Bacon Act, um, is difficult in the Senate. And the same goes for many of you may have heard of pesticide preemption provision that was in the House, but actually stripped out on the House from the House bill in the amendment process, in part because the Senate bill has to be bipartisan by a significant margin. Um, and due to the fact that I think both for the Prop 12 issue and the pesticide preemption issue, there's significant they're not strict party line divisions. And on top of that, the need for the Senate bill to be bipartisan, I think gives both of them a difficult path to being included in the Senate bill. So I don't have any concrete like intel updates as of today of likelihood in the Senate bill, but I think what we've seen publicly for that one in particular, it would have an uphill battle to be included in the Senate passed version of the bill for a number of reasons, which is a good thing, right? We don't want to be including riders like that eliminate states' options.
Thank you. And we have a few questions that are going back to the question around the very significant cuts to SNAP. And folks wondering if is there a future where restoring funding for SNAP is part of the next Farm Bill? Because there used to be such a bipartisan coalition and urban-rural coalition where urban
Right.
members in particular would often be advocates for SNAP funding. Where do you see SNAP going from here?
NSAC has the opportunity to engage with anti-hunger advocates here in Washington, D.C. And what we've seen from those communities is not an ask to restore the cuts, again, around 187 billion, but an ask to delay the cost shift burden to the states. The cost shift burden of implementing and administering the SNAP program for some states uh, could cause a state to have to decide between running SNAP or running keeping significant funding in education or some other portion of the state budget. So what we've seen nutrition advocates and Democrats lean towards is saying, let's delay that cost shift to states by at least 2 years. So from that community, it's not an ask of restore the cuts, but it's an ask of delay perhaps the biggest driver of the cuts. Um, that would cost a 2 year cost shift delay, is the terminology for it. It would cost about $16 billion. And so to reach a deal in the Senate Farm Bill around SNAP, that's at least one side of the equation. And so my sense is that's more of where the conversation is at right now. But from my perspective, restoring the cuts is not on the table um, at this point.
Um, we have a question about are there opportunities to kind of elevate the work of kind of the local and regional food systems work? We're really trying to get expand markets for fresh foods for local farmers, whether it's through food banks or schools, other institutional procurement. Um, and the question is really how to mobilize to demand the continuation of those kinds of programs.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and I think, boy, let me see if I can pull a link real quick for you. So um, those two programs, if I'm hearing the question right, are LFPA, Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, and LFS, Local Food for Schools, were initiatives of the Biden USDA, partially in response to the COVID pandemic. Um, the new administration has terminated those programs. They are not coming back despite best efforts. But there are two different bills, and I will pop this in the chat. There are two different bills in Congress right now that have bipartisan support, which is nothing to scoff at, particularly these days, that NSAC has led. Two different bills, one in the House, one in the Senate, that would not reestablish those programs verbatim, but build on the style of those programs and take the best successes of those programs and make them permanent going forward. And so that blog from earlier this year, I think, gives an overview of those two bills and what they do. What NSAC is pushing for is for those to be included in the next farm bill, and for them to get guaranteed money. And that's the thing where in the House bill, the policy framework was included for that, but not the guaranteed funding. And if you don't have the guaranteed funding, boy, then you know it can't go very far in terms of impact. So there is a legitimate path forward for those two bills, but it's really now is the moment where we've got to say to the Senate, any farm bill needs to have new resources, new investments, because that's how we're going to get those guaranteed, sustained investments in local food procurement.
Right. We have sort of somewhat of a related question, which is how do the Farm Bill and MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again, kind of the RFK Jr.'s efforts, how do the Farm Bill and MAHA impact sustainable food procurement?
Oh boy. Well, I couldn't speak for how Maha does that.
Yeah.
But I can say that so the House Farm Bill includes a provision oh boy, I lost it in my notes. Includes a provision where USDA is required or would be required to assess barriers for farmers to selling in non-traditional markets or in local and regional markets, and to assess the quality of foods being purchased by USDA through USDA procurement programs. So what it's just an assessment, it's just a study, but it is an important step to what we see as like a slightly longer term arc of better tackling procurement in a more holistic way, both at USDA and other federal agencies. So there's not much in the bill, but aside from that, in the House bill, that is, aside from that, I think depending on how you frame it, the other end of the procurement piece is really the continuation of an LFPA style program. And that very much has legs. That very much is real and could be a part of a final farm bill this year because it's bipartisan and it's popular across the country. And so really driving support for that is a
Might
key.
speak to some of the Maha-ness.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, right. We have a couple of questions related to climate change and agriculture, and then one other question on research. But first on climate change, what do NSAC members want to see in regards to climate change? And I'm not going to get into all the details, Carly, of your question, I'm sorry, but just sort of high level, how is NSAC thinking about climate change vis-a-vis the Farm Bill, and what might that look like or not look like as you advocate in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think as we all know, there's no silver bullet to climate change, particularly for farmers and ranchers and folks within our food system, including food workers, right? The folks who are out there as well. We tend to think about it in a way where we have to be investing in research that helps give information and solutions on climate impacts and climate adaptation to farmers in all four corners of California and all four corners of the country. We have to be investing in conservation, not cutting conservation. So those are two really key strategies. We also have to be thinking about how are we building out the farm safety net in a way that works for all farmers. You heard Jeannie mention just a couple of minutes ago, the farm safety net doesn't work equally for all farmers. And when a disaster strikes, that puts those farmers who can't access the farm safety net at a disadvantage. They could lose their business. A whole host of things could happen. So in thinking about climate change, we've really, for this farm bill, in the context of this political moment and this moment, there's so much more that we could do. But I think in this bill, strengthening conservation investments, not cutting them, strengthening research investments. We haven't had a chance to talk much about research. There are few, if any, new investments and movement on research within this proposal. That's the opposite of what we need to be doing. So I'd answer it in those ways. I think longer term, we've really got to be, I think, re-envisioning and rescoping what is possible for a climate future and future investments for farmers and ranchers, whether that's a farm bill next year or in the near future administration.
Thank you. One clarifying question, Mike, did you say that the House bill includes funding for carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas mitigation? And can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. I said it. So in the conservation programs, it within the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, the House bill adds carbon sequestration and GHG reduction as a new goal within EQIP that can qualify for a higher cost share. So
Right.
a layman's term is basically there's a small provision within the House bill that says if a state chooses that carbon sequestration or GHG reduction is important to them, they can qualify for more support from the federal government to invest in those sorts of agricultural conservation practices. So it's a step forward, and that I included on that slide. Not enough, but it's a step forward. being
Great.
positive.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Last question we have time for, just briefly. What role do you think research could play in improving the Farm Bill? Does NSAC have plans to evaluate implementation of HR1 or the new Farm Bill, should it pass? But yeah, sort of thinking about the
That's a
role
lot
of
of questions. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. We have a lot of thoughts around how research could be improved. I think one really quick way is a lot of the most effective research programs, like the SARE program, Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program, and others, aren't guaranteed money. We have to go fight for that money every year, and it's really hard to do so. So I think increased guaranteed investment in research programs, that stands for organic research programs and others. That's a key piece. But there are so many different ways that we could improve research programs, and we have a number of different uh, proposals of how to do so. We are tracking the implementation or kind of how HR1 is being carried out. And some of the main components of that will kick in later this year. So we're keeping a laser eye on that, including the conservation changes made in that bill. In terms of a farm bill this year, I think it's a steep uphill battle for a bill to get through the Senate and to get to the president's desk by September 30th, which is when the current law expires. So I think what we'll likely see is an extension of the current farm bill, the 2018 farm bill, beyond September 30th. Maybe they could reach a deal on a new farm bill in the lame duck after the elections this year. Um, but that's still a bit too far off. So we'll see what happens in June, and then we can come back with a better update.
Right. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I encourage people to check out NSAC's website, sign up for your newsletter. That's a great way to get updates on the Farm Bill. That's what I do as a longtime participant in NSAC. And also with the Berkeley Food Institute, you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter where we'll provide updates as well. Thank you so much for joining. Goodbye.